Welcome back, everyone, to Tarot Journeys with Guy. How's everybody doing out there? So things are moving along. We've seen quite a bit happen. Kamala Harris picked her VP. I was going to call him a viper, which he is a viper. The communist former governor of Michigan, who is one of the more progressive of the progressive politicians there, right? So very telling of what the deep state have kind of in mind, right? Like, and it's very kind of obvious. Seen quite a bit happen in the UK, and it's very telling for the rest of the world and for the rest of the Western nations, I guess, especially in the United States, I guess, but all over, like what is coming, what these guys have sort of in store, right? So basically what we've seen is the government in coordination with the police and the mainstream media, and this is over in the UK, of creating the false flag of what they were saying was 100 protest rallies planned for what they're deeming as the right wing, which the right wing are not organized. There is not really such a thing in the way that the government and the media are portraying it, right? But yet the people didn't fall for the trap. And what actually happened was it drew out all of the left-wing, progressive, pro-Palestinian organizations and Muslim groups, okay? Which now, and then you see in the UK with the government basically saying that if you post anything online about said group, about the other side, you will go to jail and you're deemed as a far-right racist, right? And so this is just, it's completely totalitarian. It's very Orwellian. You've got grandmothers, again, being arrested for posting online. Okay, and not the criminals that are running around hurting people that they've basically have let in, and now it's on purpose. This, I think, is kind of like a test run, right? Really what's happening is these globalists are panicking. Now, they all have sort of the same playbook, but yet their lines of communication are sort of really broken off. Now, just before Keir Starmer, the UK Prime Minister, got sort of voted in, Obama went and visited him and had a it was sort of an aloof visit. Now, isn't that funny, right? Now what we see in the States, it's the same kind of thing, right? They have been attempting to do that, limit people's freedom of speech and favoring groups, minority groups, and deeming the people as the enemy, okay? So this is we have to pay attention to this, and it's very important, and this is a global thing. This is something that is really taking place all over the planet. You see these guys, these globalists, really making their play, right? Yeah, so like, with the open borders and the United Nations migration policy of letting all of these people in, well, you've got operatives from all of these different countries where the deep state, these deep state elements, the globalists have been operating. It's all coming to a head, and it really does concern the U.S. election. I mean, they've openly admitted, the globalists, that if Trump gets into power, they're done for. Okay, so yesterday Biden in an interview was basically saying that if Trump gets in, there's not going to be a peaceful transition of power, and that and then the week before that, or I think it was a couple of days before that, what's his name, Jamie Raskin, who's also a very sort of he's a big part of that Democratic deep state players that are definitely sort of like out in the front, right? Basically saying the same thing, that there's going to be a civil war sort of scenario, that the Trump mob is going to cause a big disturbance. And it's like, wait a second, what do we see? We don't see the people Like it's like in the UK. Like, I mean, there was the looting and stuff like this, but in some ways that might be contrived. I'm not really sure, right? See, and this is what people have to sort of really pay attention to. But in the States, we didn't see this. We saw the left side, the BLM riots, looting. We see the violence and everything coming from the other side as they gaslight, right? And so that's a big part of this, is that they're in this gaslighting operation trying to convince people. It's so much like the Soviet era, so much like communist countries, where they do this. They implement these tactics, and they basically openly lie to people, and a certain percentage of people sort of accept it, and that's utilized to silence the rest that are there to oppose it, right? And so, well, what we are seeing sort of play out in the UK right now, especially with what the government is saying and how they're openly saying that they're going to, incriminate and prosecute everybody that is deemed far right. And and they've implemented in the UK this kind of nanny state where it is illegal to be offensive. So anything can be sort of deemed in those categories, okay? And then you've got this other thing of calling people who aren't terrorists, right? And you're letting in these terrorists, the government. So that's like, they're showing us the game plan. And so on top of that, he's already said, like, they're going to push through with this, like, a furtherment of the online hate speech laws and amping them up, and face recognition and flight bans. This is like the precursor of the social credit system, right? And so, yeah, and people can't really feed into it. We can't fight it in the way that they want us to fight, which is the obvious way. We're leading up to the end of the Olympics, so it's kind of curious on what they project out. And I'm definitely curious on what is going to come up into the next couple of days for sure, because, this is what we're dealing with. It's like every day there's something else. There's a lot of whistleblowers in every country. I mean, the same thing is happening in Europe. Same thing is happening in Australia. They have been actively putting a lot of patriots in prisons in a lot of these different countries, right? And it's hard to get the sort of the word out, but the people are, resisting and trying to call it out as best as they can. But inch by inch, they keep implementing some of these globalist agendas, especially around the total control grid, right? Digital ID, cashless society, social credit system, everybody being monitored, right? A lot of whistleblowers coming out, a lot of people basically, in the infrastructure of the deep state, basically coming out and telling their plans. And it's like, I mean, the Trump assassination attempt is sort of like, has facilitated a lot of people in the States to come out. And like this thing in the UK too, right now, is also, there's people coming out basically trying to get the information out, that basically saying like, yeah, the government that is installed is like illegitimate, and is deemed you as the enemy. And that's what we're dealing with in every country, right? And like these people, like, with a smiling face, will gaslight us and say, I'm on your side, and basically sign your death warrant, But yeah, with these whistleblowers coming out, and it's the information, especially so like with the Trump assassination attempt, and then, you got like a lot of military people and stuff coming out about, things about what's happening in the Middle East right now, and also with the open border invasion in the States and who they're actually letting in. So that's going to be interesting, right? It's very telling, right? It's going to be very telling. Okay, let's see. So what do we need to hear? What's best? What's going to help us navigate in the next couple of days? What do we need to know? What do we need to be prepared for? Is what's going on with President Trump? Is he safe? They're going to make another attempt at his life. What are the deep state plays? And mostly, like, what do we need to be aware of? So here we are in the center here. This is we got past, present, future. Make sure. So the Lover's reversed. Okay, so a major arcana card. This is sort of like an ongoing spiritual lesson that we're sort of this is an ongoing spiritual lesson that we have to sort of live through. Okay. Yeah, the major arcanas being archetypes, being sort of major events, being sort of major tactics that they use. Division. So we see the division, right? The Lovers, when it's reversed, this is the two opposing parts can't find unity. They're opposing, right? And a lot of the time it refers to our own inner workings, okay? So it's like this thing of like driving this division with people, okay? And so, yeah, and you see the divisiveness with, yeah, you see the divisiveness with what's going on. But the problem is right now is that this is not a time to be sitting on the fence, okay? To me, it's very simple. It's either you are for the people or you are for the totalitarian system that is about to clamp down on you. Okay, that is that simple. And people have to make that decision now. They have to fully say, yes, I'm on board with the people, regardless of what's being projected, regardless of how difficult it is, regardless of what I have to go through. Okay. A lot of us at home, a lot of people that have been watching me for the last year or so, and longer, I guess, in many ways, understand this and have already accepted this, right? But this is also what we have to sort of maybe communicate to people, you know, and when the Three of Swords is in the spiritual area, which is what this is, it's sort of like what crowns the reading. What is the spiritual impulse? What's the spiritual message? And it's like, it really has a lot to do with sort of getting at us at certain core, like I mean, we know that they're hooking us or attempting to hook us with the emotional field, the lower emotional field. But this is like thoughts and mind. And so like what they're doing in creating division is through ideology, race, religion, let's say, right now, okay? So to become aware of that, that's what's messaging right now, right? So in so many ways, what is being sort of broadcasted on both sides has everything to do with that, but they're trying to hook people with those concepts, with those ideas, okay? Which of course it makes sense. That's part of an information war, okay? But that's what we got to be aware of, the traps and the hooks and everything that's the snares, okay? Because like part of this thing, like what we saw with the UK was, this is like they're setting out traps. The government has their big, you know, emergency meeting, what they call their Cobra meeting, and then right away it comes out that there's going to be 100 rallies, you know, these far right in parentheses rallies, and they didn't happen. Nobody knew who was organizing them. Nobody knew where they were coming from, just out of nowhere. Pretty auspicious. People are smart, man. People are super smart. Like right away when that happened, enough people were like, wait a second, this is a trap. Don't take part. Don't get involved in that, right? And that's what we got to be more tuned into. And it's super important, right? And to communicate, to keep the lines of communication open no matter what. Like just because things get shut down online doesn't mean that those lines of communication you don't communicating. That's why it's really important to be connecting with people of like right now. It's just like the negative messaging is there to divide us, right? And so like part of their whole thing, right? It's like, yeah, their system, Like, this is the past. Their system is already collapsed in a lot of ways, or like a big part of this whole idea was this controlled collapse of the economy, okay, or the controlled collapse of things, okay, except, you know, parts of it were sort of, parts of that agenda didn't work out. But it doesn't mean that in some of these, in our countries, that these deep state operatives, they're still operating, right? And that's kind of what we're seeing, is these people are still sort of pushing these agendas, even though, and the economy is one of them, right? This is another thing, like they're sort of like trying to gauge, like, how are people going to sort of deal with this circumstance so that we can sort of clamp down on them, so that we can trigger this system that we have in the waiting. And that's part of that whole idea, is the traps that are set. There's something always in the waiting. This is what we've seen. This is part of the past, what the past has shown us here. They know, the deep state knows that what happens after this sort of phase of like complete progressive isms, and the state is kind of like put into upheaval, that people require structure, they require stability, right? So that's one thing, is that they're now like, and you see this with all these kind of all these authoritarian, totalitarian types. They whip up a frenzy with certain bits of rhetoric, and then they try to present themselves as being the stability that's needed, right? And that they know this. They're trying to play into it, but part of the problem is that they are losing, like, completely, like, the whole fabric of the infrastructure of their thing is sort of imploding, okay? And like, and people are getting wise to it, and so they're trying to present the opposite of that, so that enough people sort of buy into it. What we've seen with these globalists is that they've taken all different systems of like socialism and like the Islamic revolutionary sort of doctrine, and like, you know, what we saw with Nazi Germany and any kind of revolutionary kind of theory or doctrine. They've kind of taken all sort of forms of it and sort of come up with this kind of game plan. And it's very, like, I mean, these guys are trying to create this global socialist totalitarian order. A lot of them are very socialistic and communistic in so many ways, right? And so, right, and that's kind of what we're dealing with, is that they're saturating the populace with a certain number of adherents to a revolutionary sort of idea, or an idea of upheaval, and once that's sort of reached, they go full blown, like they get triggered, right? And so some of the stuff that we're seeing is a little bit preemptive, right? They're not fully there, but they're trying to get away with it already, and that's what we got to keep in mind, okay? It's very important to keep that in mind, that these guys are freaking out and panicking, okay? Okay, what else do we need to hear? Okay, so 6 of Pentacles here. This card really refers to balance and order in a lot of ways. And the only thing that, like, we got to keep in mind, that what we are seeing right now in the world, in many ways, has to take place right now in order for balance to be restored. It has to happen. We've been asleep for so long, okay? And we've allowed, in many ways, we've allowed a lot of this to happen in our worlds. Those that have been sort of active in the world for the last, you know, like our whole lives, this has been taking place. These guys have been sort of inserting themselves, infiltrating, passing on precepts, ideas, concepts, you know. Like I was saying in the last reading, like they're using sort of ideas from history. Now, one of the things is the long game, you know, like you see it with the creation of communist China. It took almost 25 years 20 years, 25 years. Yeah. It happened in stages and steps in the long march. And, you got to get into the history, right? The Cultural Revolution that happened in the 60s. This is kind of what we see with some of the stuff that's sort of taking place with the progressive side, what we've seen in the last 4 years, right? For instance, but that's just, keep that in mind. And it's these guys know, they play semantic games. They've been rewriting history, glossing over certain ideas, and using confirmation bias as a way, and labeling people, and using those labels to sort of get into people's minds. Okay. And it's this, like we see it with Trump, we see it with President Trump. It's like, you see it in other parts of the Western world where they're going through similar things, but yet, and they sound like Trump in some ways, but they're because of the propaganda, because of how they've been sort of projecting onto, the psychological projection, it has an effect. It does work. It plays on people's minds. And so that's a big part of it, right? It's like, yeah, the people in secret are the ones that are actually pulling the strings. And like a lot of the times what we see in the front, there's only a very few people that are out in the public that are actually like in charge, right? And there's a bunch of string pullers. This is the nature of the deep state, of this establishment. But there is this global thing that has been sort of built up with these guys, right? And that's something that we got to keep in mind. It's a lot of stuff that's being sort of projected, and a lot of these policies, like these United Nations policies, the World Health Organization, there's a whole bunch of different things. NATO is another one of these international, interstate organizations where things on a local level are sort of passed through without the people's say. Now they've been working on that for 30 years, at least, if not longer, to break up the laws and to sort of break up the local people's ability to address concerns and policies and things that are passed from a higher level. So they're putting us into these positions where they're wanting us to sort of, like a violent upheaval. But what's sort of really sort of proving is that they're like the progressive side is the ones that are promoting violence, that are promoting this idea. Okay. Yeah. Not to sort of play into those traps, right? Is to really understand that there is a core to what has been established in the previous centuries. This goes back centuries and centuries. There is things that are sort of built within Western culture that need to stay, for sure, that are good. That's what we have to sort of celebrate and honor. But yet that, I know that it's used against us in some ways, right? And so like that idea of not sort of falling for the trap of the division, like in the first spread that we did of what was it? Well, the traps, we know all the different isms that they throw out, right? And we do have to address them, but not to fall into the sort of like the label, the label projection, the confirmation bias that with the word play, and that's a part of it. And like, I mean, in some ways, it is good for people to sort of step back, but like we are in a war, like there is a war against the people. And so, and I understand that people need to take a break, but they're, what they say, all is fair in love and war. So there really is no breaks in war, right? So you got to take your little breaks when you can, especially if you're active right now, but we got to stay on this. We can't really step back. It's for our families. It's for future generations. And we keep that in mind always, right? But that's the thing. It is gonna, there's gonna be a switch around, right? Like a lot of doom and gloom right now, but yet there's gonna be some things that kind of switch it around again, right? And we are gonna see positive signs of yeah, the people kind of taking back what is needed to take back, right? So it is like chess, right? It's one move this way, another move that way. And, we can't get caught up in the little actions. We have to sort of also keep our mind on the big picture, but we stay present. Yeah, let's do one more and then we'll close her off. So I don't get any problems with Trump in the next couple of days as well. He's been very active. He's making a lot of connections. It's good. He's out there doing the rallies. He's building up to this election period. He's like I was saying in the readings, he's kind of like behind the scenes cutting deals. But it has a lot to do with reclaiming what has been lost because of this globalist agenda and stopping this sort of deindustrialization, transhumanist, globalist, totalitarian, communist agenda that they keep pushing. Like that is basically sending us on a path of destruction. Okay. Okay, so very important. Realize that a lot of the fight right now, and it always has been like this, especially when it comes to the people, is like, we need to be active, okay? And realize that a lot of it is of a psychological nature. But the thing is not to fall into the trap of fighting, to actively fighting these guys, whether it's and man, it's really tough. Like the online thing is really kind of tricky, right? You got to understand like what are the traps that they lay out and the word games that are played, right? You have to understand the terms of service, and you have to understand what are some of these peculiarities of the law in the countries that you're living in, because they've made it really strict depending on where you are. But we're seeing it in the UK, okay? And the same thing is in Australia, same things in Canada, same things in the States, depending on what it is. But the thing is, if you like stay away from these rallies and stuff right now until you know that they're properly organized and from the right people, and enough people are sort of in the know about what's right and what's not, okay? And not to fall into that trap. Like, seeing any kind of violence or anything like out on the streets or anything like that, don't get involved. Just don't get involved. I mean, I know a lot of people that are watching online, like that are watching me, like you're not getting involved, but like, yeah, don't, be careful. Just be very careful right now. Because it's part of the trap. Like that's what we're seeing. That's what we're seeing, people getting arrested for stuff that they didn't do, right? And that, we're all kind of needed in this spiritual, psychological war, this information war, and taking part in the democratic process as much as possible and within the framework of the laws, even though the law doesn't seem to be legitimate or, is two-faced, two-tiered. But that's the thing. That's part of that lawfare, right? The weaponization of the judicial system. And it's strange. Like there's little things like communicating to politicians is still sort of a way to kind of get through to it. I mean, it's very different in Canada in the sense of, but I guess there's a similarity in these deep state controlled areas where there doesn't seem to be any sort of political will or legitimacy. But yeah, when we do get involved and when we do present our case in a right way, it works. It really does. And we're finding the right opportunities. So don't let this little hiccup or what's happening right now distract, okay? It's coming to the end of a cycle and sort of moving into a new sort of energy. And rest assured, man, the deep state side, they're losing. This is why they're panicking, man. And and you're gonna see more riots in places because they're gonna trigger it, right? Yeah, they're gonna use this, like the migration thing. Open borders is gonna become more of a hot button topic, and there is gonna be more triggered violence in the days to come, I guess, in the following weeks leading up to the US election and even afterwards, right? Until these guys are actually caught. But not to get alarmed, right? Really to not get alarmed. This is part of their game plan, and it is in stages, right? So, and the more the actual people are aware of these things, the more it stops, right? And that's a big part of it, is stopping these guys in their tracks. So don't get too caught up in the current events as usual, and really sort of realize that we are not alone in all of this. We're all together spiritually and energetically, and it is about the human family sort of taking back its sovereignty and stopping these guys all over the planet. And it is this beautiful opportunity for humanity to truly come together. Like, I mean, these opposing sides, these divisions, they could drop their weapons and come together and see that we're all being played. Humans, when it comes down to the human essence, they really just want the best for their families. There's just a small percentage of people that are death cultists, that don't care, that are nihilists, right? And that's what we got to keep in mind. We are the greater part of it, right? And we are taking part in this motion that is happening all over the planet. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. As always, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and wherever you are, take care, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.